Canamex has the Bruner Gold Project in Nevada. Why don't you give us a brief overview of what that project is and why Canamex is excited about it?
The Bruner Gold Project is a project that's been around since the end of the 1890s, when some high-grade veins were mined and processed locally or shipped directly off to some smelters in Virginia City. For about 60, 70 years it sat idle, and then a number of larger companies in succession, beginning in the 1970s and through the 1980s and into the 1990s, did some initial drill testing of it, looking for a large volcanic-hosted gold system. They found a number of intercepts, but didn't find the size of resource that they were looking for. So it languished until Canamex came along really in 2010, cut a deal with a company called Patriot Gold under an option to purchase agreement. And we have spent the minimum expenditure requirement, which was $6 million, to earn our 70% interest in the project, which we have now done, and have had some exceptional drill results over the course of the last 5 years that we've been drilling the project. So we're excited because the three resources that we've identified to date are all open-ended. And so we have tremendous exploration potential to add to the initial resource estimate that we published last March, which is roughly 300,000 ounces of contained gold.
Right, and that resource estimate came off the back of some holes in late 2014 that had some really promising gold grades in them. Right,
the last several holes that we drilled in 2014 were in the Paymaster area, which was one of these old historic mine areas that had been nibbled at by some of the other exploration companies, but only peripherally. So we went into what we think might be the core of the area, and we drilled 10 holes, and many of those holes were mineralized, including 3 of the last 4, which had rather spectacular intercepts of about 12 or 13 meters of 8 or 9 grams. So part of our work program for 2015, this fall, was to go back into that area and see if we could extend that resource by drilling to the north, which hadn't been drilled in the past. And so we're currently waiting on the results from that drilling program. But in the meantime, we did collect bulk rejects from the 2014 drilling program and ran those through a metallurgical test program at Kappas Cassidy Associates, which is a large, well-known testing facility in Reno. And we just announced those results this morning, which are that 95% of the gold in those drill cuttings is cyanide extractable. And we had very low reagent consumptions. The reagents that one consumes in cyanide leaching is cyanide, of course, and then lime, which is used to adjust the pH. And both of those reagent consumptions were very low, which means we're going to have relatively low costs associated with leaching when we get to including those in the preliminary economic assessment, which is just about to get underway.
Those metallurgical results are certainly very promising. Obviously, cyanide, the fact that it's leachable in itself with such good recoveries is really, it bodes very well for the project, and low reagent consumptions, again, bodes very well. Can you talk a little bit about the geometry of the mineralization in terms of, I know the PA isn't done yet, but how that might feed into what kind of mining operation you're looking at?
Well, we have 3 resources there. They're each separated, they're about a mile from each other. So the Paymaster resource is a mile north or 1.5 kilometers north of the HRA, which stands for Historic Resource Area, which is where most of the historical drilling was conducted. And that is about 1.5 kilometers or a mile away from the Pinellas Resource Area, which was what we had focused on in 2012-13 and the first half of 2014. So we have 3 resource areas. They all are amenable to open pit mining. The resource that we announced in March is included in pit design, and it is constrained by operating costs that are reflective of operating costs today in an open pit heap leach scenario. So these are not what historically have been referred to as geologic resources or in-ground resources. These are resources that report within current economic pit, and that will be included in the preliminary economic assessment, which really just needs to add capital costs to those operating costs that are referenced in the 43-101 in order to come out with a cash flow model for the project, which will determine how much money one can make off of the operation as the resources currently stand.
Also recently, Canamex announced a deal that looks like it's going to save the company over $400,000 having to do with a project payment. Can you just go through that quickly?
Right. The option that we have included an option to purchase the underlying private land, which are termed patented claims in the United States. And we had a big balloon payment that was due on April 1, 2016. It was for $1.185 million U.S. And the underlying landowner came to us in August and said he had a need for some cash, and if we could swing it, he would reduce the price if we could accelerate the payment. So over the course of about a 2-month period of time, we negotiated with the landowner and then with a source of capital in order to be able to raise the capital necessary to exercise that right to purchase. It turns out we didn't actually exercise the right to purchase. That's held by our joint venture partner, Patriot. What we did was we bought the right out from the landowner directly, which is still subject to our partner's right to purchase. But because we have a joint venture agreement with Patriot, that really is kind of like our right to option our own property. So we've effectively saved us and the joint venture, assuming the joint venture gets consummated in a proper joint venture agreement, which is in progress, saves the entities $435,000 or so U.S. The PAA is expected to be due out in March, so we're hopeful that sometime before the end of the first quarter we can announce the results of that preliminary economic assessment.
And I'm sure you're looking forward to seeing what that study comes up with.
Right. We have a pretty good idea. This is not our first attempt at something like this. In the past, I've built and operated 3 open-pit heap leach mines, 2 gold-silver mines, and 1 copper mine. And so and before 43-101 ever came about, we would do these sorts of analyses internally in order to make decisions absent the regulatory requirements that currently exist. So we've done our own internal analysis on what we think the result is going to look like, and that's what encouraged us to go ahead and proceed with a formal third-party preliminary economic assessment.